Our story begins with Valen the Pure, Altion of Bladehaven, and Lunaria the Healer. The trio traveled the land of lore, slaying beasts of darkness and amassing an army of good to take down the champion of darkness, who had a grip on the world of lore, known by the name of Slugrat Jakrath, more infamously as Detrix. Detrix had made an alliance with all the evil forces of darkness across the land and enslaved the human race. This was how he came to power. Sir Altion, being a knight under Detrix, saw this and fled to start his own rebellion against the very champion of darkness himself. It was at Skarsgård Fortress where the trio got their first major victory against Detrix and proved to him that they were a real threat. From Skarsgård, the trio would continue to fight Detrix's evil forces throughout the land, until eventually they drove him out, sending him back. However, the real, not self-proclaimed champion of darkness, as Detrix claimed he was still out there. So the trio set out on their final mission, where they eventually sealed the Doom Knight armor, which would create a new champion of darkness when worn by anybody. As such, it was sealed away in the Guardian Tower, and 4 years later, no one heard anything of it. It was, of course, after those 4 years, where the champion of darkness being thought to be sealed away, and with the threat of Detrix gone, that Detrix himself launched his counterattack on the city of Swordhaven at Altion and Lunaria's wedding. It was during this wedding that Detrix captured Lunaria and began his battle against the kingdom. This would be where Valen and Altion would split ways, with Altion stating that Lunaria would much rather the kingdom be saved than herself, and to not put their selfish desires ahead of the people. Valen, not wanting to listen, instead of following Altion's orders to defend the village, went to save Lunaria, who was being held in a dungeon at Ebenslate Fortress. This is where Valen lost his very first battle to the Detrix. In his hour of despair, Valen was approached by the mysterious stranger, a force from the plane of darkness that promised him the power to save Lunaria if he could get his hands on the Doom Knight armor. Valen, now being fueled by the force of evil, revenge, and most importantly, love, tore his way through all the guardians present at the Guardian Tower and took the Doom Knight armor for himself. He had now become the new champion of darkness. Still retaining some of what made him, he eradicated Detrix with no issues at all and saved Lunaria. However, she did not recognize him and instead only saw the darkness that the armor had given him. As for Altion, upon seeing that Lunaria was saved by Valen in the Doom Knight armor, berated Valen on the failures that he had committed in leaving the people of the kingdom to perish, and that he was no longer his friend, rather that he was simply a sepulture. Seeing that he had lost his friend, Altion saw the only conclusion necessary to be facing off with his friend. But they would be no match for Valen, who was able to take down Altion even with the assistance of his dragon. And even with their combined strength of Lunaria, her champion of light powers, and her dragon, they were no match for Sepulchure, who in then turn revived Lunaria's dragon to make it his own personal Draco Lich, which he would use to escape their clutches and come back and fight another day. It was then that Sepulchure enlisted the help of Noxus, the most powerful necromancer alive, and struck a contract with him to enlist an army of never-ending undead and a flying Draco Lich fortress in exchange for getting rid of King Altion's elite Swordhaven paladins at Doomwood. It would be after this battle that Lunaria would join Sepulchure at his new fortress and begin the process of purification. With the Avatar of Light, a being that is known as a god of the Plane of Light, they worked on an attempt to bring back Valen. However, it would be during this time that Sepulchure and Lunaria would bear a child, Gravelin, which Sepulchure would know his child as being the last bit of humanity he had left. After failing to purify Sepulchure, Lunaria would lose her memories of ever being with Sepulchure for the 8-month stay, and any memory she had of trying to cure him. It would be 10 years later where the war of good and evil between King Altion the Good and Sepulchure the Evil would culminate in a battle that would wound King Altion permanently and kill Sepulchure indefinitely when the champion of chaos, Dracath, struck them both down. This is where the story of Sepulchure would end. Sepulchure, I would argue, is one of AE's best written characters. Granted that his story was rewritten about 3 times. Every time that story was rewritten, there was more depth added to his character, and you can really see why King Altion is the true villain of Artix Entertainment. Jokes aside, however, Sepulture's story does have a deeper meaning, and I think it is one of the best examples within Artix Entertainment, at least, of the tragic villain. And it was done pretty well, I would say. For you see, Sepulture encapsulates the tragic hero archetype of fiction. He was a hero loved by all, blessed with talent, and was on the rise to making a real name for himself as a hero. He had the girl but lost it to his rival and eventually sacrificed it all for her again. He is a classic example of living long enough to see yourself become the villain instead of dying a hero. And I think what's interesting about Sepulture is his metamorphosis into the villain that he is very poetic. You know, it starts with his old self dying at the hands of Detrix, and he himself is reborn once again into the Doom Knight armor. Which is funny because when you look at the definition of the word Sepulture itself, that word quite literally translates to, quote, a small room or monument, cut in rock or built of stone, in which a dead person is laid or buried. So you could say that the monument itself is the Doom Knight armor, and that is where an old Valen went to go rest and awoke once again in the cursed Doom Knight armor as a Sepulture. In our case, Detrix struck him down, and he was reborn again by the mysterious stranger. If we're looking more towards a tragic hero archetype, we see Altion take a heavy role in this creation, as he interrupts the relationship Valen and Lunaria had in this love triangle sort of conflict that they have going on throughout the story. And even within Adventure Quest Worlds, it's heavily implied that Lunaria regretted her decision to marry Altion, and she even breaks her loyalty to him when she bears a child with Valen, who at the time is transformed to Sepulture, which she deems as a moment of weakness. I personally think she married Altion as a way to create a unified kingdom of Swordhaven, similar to how in past history many warring kingdoms would establish peace by marrying their separate kingdoms, prince and princesses. With that established, however, let's talk about Sepulture's strength. In addition to his character arc being well written, he is extremely powerful. Let's go ahead and take a look at how powerful he is. He was not only able to take Altion, which at the time was one of the greatest warriors of the land, but he was also able to take on his dragon, and right after was able to take on the Champion of Light, Lunaria, and her dragon all at the same time. Not to mention that he was able to corrupt the Avatar of Light, which is pretty much the god of the realm of Plane of Light, with one blow, and was able to resist a very powerful spell crafted by Lunaria, the Champion of Light herself, to purify Sepulture. So, all in all, he's pretty dang strong. The only real times we saw Sepulture lose anything was against Siegfried Sunshield in the Siege of the Necromancy Tower arc, and that was after he had taken on a number of paladins and this paladin siege engine. And even then, he got right up and defeated Siegfried. And lastly, it would be during the fight with Drakath, but let's be honest, either Sepulture was just caught off guard, old age had done him in, or Drakath simply was that powerful. Regardless, Sepulture is extremely powerful, and if he was kept alive in the Adventure Quest World storyline a lot longer, he may have been a little too overpowered. So I understand why they would need to get rid of him. Now, I want to take a look at Sepulture as a simp, but who then became a chotch. I'm well aware that everyone knows what a simp is, but perhaps not a chotch. Simply put, a chotch is just another word for a chad, which I'm sure you're familiar with. So, as you know, Sepulture and Lunaria had a child while she was staying with him in Castle Shadowfall, and she admits that she's not proud of it. But in reality, it was her true feelings coming to the surface, and I just want to commend Sepulture for still being able to bag it after Altion supposedly took her. Props to him, and probably his final victory before his untimely passing. All in all, Sepulture has many qualities that make him a great character to analyze. With our final thoughts, weirdly enough, one thing that I want to look at is that the AQ World story first outlined Sepulture's descent in Doomwood Part 2, but is then rebranded during the Sepulture Rising arc, which took place in 2018, which is why we use that as reference for all of this. Artix on Twitter posted the following Adventure Quest World's family timeline that states that Sepulture merely adopted Gravelyn and that the Avatar of Light created Gravelyn herself, which is a weird thought given that Lunaria was the Warrior of Light, and it would make sense that it's passed down heretically, but you know, this is just something that I thought was interesting. In the 2018 story, Detrix is King Slugrath, but it's never explicitly stated that he is. But I think giving him the name Detrix and giving him a new look made him a lot more menacing and more of a threat than the original story, which I also found interesting. In conclusion, Artix Entertainment has been able to create great stories and great characters. They've been on a decline as of late, but I don't think it's too late for them to come back to glory and create a character and storyline as appealing as that of Sepulchure. Thank you for watching, and I look forward to seeing you in the next.